Senator Marsha Blackburn. We are pleased and honored to have her join us this afternoon on the Matt Murphy Show to talk about these and other matters happening in Washington, D.C. Senator, good afternoon. Hope you're well.
I am doing well. Thank you so much. And yes, we are in D.C. and we are encouraging the Senate to move forward on our appropriations bills. The good thing is the Senate has moved these out of the Appropriations Committee and they're ready to go to the floor. But as you know, Matt, all the funding measures need to originate in the House and then come to the Senate in order for the Senate to take them up. So we want them to get busy, to get all of these done. We want to be able to do some spending cuts. And as your listeners know, every year that I was in the state Senate and then in the U.S. House and here in the Senate, I offer legislation that would be a 1%, a 2%, or a 5% across the board cut. And I fully believe that any agency can find a way to save a penny out of a dollar. They ought to be able to do that. And if they did that every year for 10 years, it would be amazing how much of the taxpayer money that they could save.
Senator, the frustration that I hear from Middle Tennessee revolves around an inability on the part of the House, and they're not blaming the Senate body. I mean, you guys were ready to receive these appropriations bills, obviously, and those that you have, you just mentioned, you're working them. And that is with the Democrat, I would note, that's with the Democrat majority. It's a fine split, but that's with the Democrat majority in the Senate. The frustration that I hear, and you were a part of this body prior to being a United States Senator, was the idea that they didn't see the urgency back in August. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this, and is there a better way to handle this year to year to get back to a sense of regular order?
Well, I think a couple of things would help. Every year I have supported a balanced budget amendment, balancing the budget without a tax increase. That would be a good thing so that people realize you've got to construct this document. And once the president presents his document, he's supposed to do it in February. He did not do it this year until April. But people need to be working on this to meet that responsibility to fund the government. The second thing is regular order is very good on this. And since this is a requirement of Congress, they need to be starting on these committee hearings to authorize in January and February and not waiting until April and May to start this. Regular order would go a long way to putting the parameters in place to actually cut into that baseline. There is another concept that I'm a big believer in, and it is zero-based budgeting, which would require every department every year to start with a clean sheet of paper and a fresh pencil and put down what they need, not what they want, and not look at how much baseline budgeting, Matt, allows them to say, last year we got $100. This year, we're going to ask for $110. And then it comes back, they get $105. And what do they run out and say? Oh, you cut
You cut our spending. That's right.
Yeah, we didn't cut anything. You got $5 more than you got last year. That is called an increase. So if you had to have zero-based budgeting, you would not be able to do that because every year you would have to start over from zero and look at things that have outlived their usefulness, look at places of employment and positions that have outlived their usefulness, and just like a company does, decide what is going to need more attention and what needs less, and where you can actually use technology and achieve efficiencies and save some money.
Final thought on this budgeting process, and then I want to ask you one question about the Department of Health and Human Services, very important one considering what's going on the southern border. You voted no on the stopgap, on the 45-day stopgap, and I just want you to talk to Tennessee and explain why you were a no vote.
I was a no vote because I feel like the House had not done their job getting things to us. The Senate was ready to move forward, as we discussed. And the other thing is we've got $33 trillion in debt. Through COVID, this spending has just run off the rails. It has been non-stop. And for the sake of our children and grandchildren, we have got to get this under control. The interest on the debt is an increasing expense. You don't want to make it so high that kids and grandkids can't afford to live. And we know inflation is just killing people. If you want to get inflation under control, what is the number one thing every economist will tell you? You have to reduce federal spending. And we had the chance to reduce that federal spending and do something about the border. And nothing on those two issues got done.
Speaking of the border, you're demanding some transparency and honesty from the Department of Health and Human Services. Talk to me about, we heard a good bit from the liberal media regarding, separation of children from adults to make sure that these adults were these children's parents on the southern border during the Trump administration. We're hearing nothing about that now because they want to dismiss this mistreatment of some 85,000 missing migrant children. Talk to me about that.
Yes, and indeed, I've got two pieces of legislation. First of all, requiring them to reinstate the DNA testing at the southern border. We found out that a third of those kids coming to the border were being trafficked. Also, and this is what I've been on since March with HHS and their Office of Refugee Resettlement. There are 300,000 unaccompanied alien children that have come in on Joe Biden's watch. The Health and Human Services and Office of Refugee Resettlement and Department of Homeland Security cannot find 85,000 of those children. They have been turned over to sponsors that were selected. And by the way, they had loosened the vetting requirements and made it easier for people to apply and to be approved. They cannot find these children. They do not know if they're dead or alive. They do not know if they're working in drug trafficking, if they're linked onto gangs, if they are being forced into sex trafficking. And the fact that they cannot find them, I brought up this to Secretary Becerra and asked for his response. I cited a New York Times article. There's a reporter there that has been following this issue. They have found children that are working in factories, children that are working in meat processing plants, and are working in food processing, and they cannot find these children, and they cannot find the sponsors. And we have got to have them step up. I did not get an answer in committee. I wrote him a letter. They wrote me back about 6 weeks later with some insufficient answers, but never addressed the problem. So I've written them again. What are they doing to locate these children that they turned over to federal government selected sponsors and approved by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and now they have no clue where these children are located. And we're going to stay on this. This is a humanitarian crisis. You have that border wide open, record numbers, and it is the Biden border policy, and where these children, minors, have gone, they cannot tell you, and they are not working to find them.
Senator, thank you so much for your time today. We always appreciate it. Thank you for your work on this southern border issue, specifically with HHS. We appreciate you, and we look forward to a new conversation. I promise to get you out at 15. I'm only a minute late, Senator, so that's
got it.
that's
Take
good.
Care,
all right,
Matt.
take care. There's Marsha Blackburn joining us for a few moments.